Okay, y'all. Now we're going to start looking at essay 2. Or no, wait. I'm sorry. Just kidding. We're going to start looking at essay 3. This is essay 3. This is the one that was less strong, but it's not terrible. It's an okay essay. I just don't want you to shoot for this one. I personally see a lot of weaknesses with it, but it was good enough to pass. I can't promise you that it'll be that easy this year, because if you look again, look at the yellow is what they did well. There's also lots of reds and there's lots of commentaries. That's that weird orange that you're seeing right there. It's like commentary. Okay, so let's go through student essay 3. Claire Booth Luce. Again, we don't see a broad opener. They don't make any effort at bringing the audience in. They start immediately with analyzing the piece. And again, that's okay. If you're running low on time and you don't have time for the broad opener, cool, man. Address and introduce your audience, your piece, your purpose. Okay, so they introduce Claire Booth Luce crafts the introduction of her speech to the journalist at the Women's National Press Club in 1960 in a very calculated manner. Okay, so let's go through this. This is great. Claire Booth Luce, speaker named. Introduction of her speech. They gave more specific context than the 8 up here. Remember, this one was just the speech. This one named it specifically, the introduction of her speech. And they name her audience, the journalist, and the context, the where, and the when is all given right there. In a very calculated manner, let's talk about the word very. If I see the word very, or just, or really, used anywhere in your essays, I'm going to throw up on the screen as I read, and then it's going to mess up my whole computer. It's going to be a bad day. I'm going to be super upset. Yeah, okay. Why? Because it doesn't add anything. It just adds in extra words. To the journalist at the Women's National Press Club in 1960 in a calculated manner is the same thing as saying to the journalist at the Women's National Press Club in 1960 in a very calculated manner. Don't add it in. It adds nothing to your writing. And why is this highlighted? Well, because it's just vague. She does it in a calculated manner. What are you talking about? Calculated manner tells me nothing. It tells me no tone. It doesn't tell me if it's critical. It doesn't tell me if it's humorous. Always go with the tone and not some vague word choice that you got right here. Okay, so Luce submits not only her audience to criticism, but herself, okay? So we even saw that in the last one. They talked about her self-deprecation, how she really kind of puts herself down at points just to make herself a little bit more humble in front of her audience. Okay, so that's their first strategy they're going to analyze. And then their next strategy is this one, all the while reminding the journalist that it is on their request that she is delivering a speech. Okay, so what did this kid do? They gave you the first strategy and they gave you the second strategy, but I typed this in. What are they missing? They're missing the purpose. Why? So that she can prepare her audience for her criticisms to come. That's it. That's what she's doing. And that purpose is missing. That purpose always needs to be present in your thesis. Okay, so let's look at the next paragraph. If you can look at this paragraph, this is like huge font right here, and it's super short. Super short. The length of your paragraphs, if I see a short body paragraph, if it's 4 or 5 lines, let's slim this down to 12, like what you would have had on your timed writing. If we slim that down to 12 and we unbold it, look at that. It's only like 5 lines. If yours is only 4 or 5 lines, that tells me right at a glance, not enough is analyzed. So let's read it. Luce first acknowledges that by delivering her critique, she will be subjected to criticism herself. For she remorts. Look at them trying to use an elevated vocab. The problem is that there's no integration. For she remorts is just another way to say states. For she states, remember, I want you to start paraphrasing all of this. For she states that banquet speakers, and that's when you could have put it in direct quotes. For she states that banquet speakers, and then summarize all of this. For banquet speakers that criticize their audience, but she doesn't. So not only does she blankly just state it, she doesn't integrate it, she just blatantly introduces it, She just throws it into her sentence. It's also a really long quote. Look at how long that quote is. Too long. Evidence is way too long. You need to be paraphrasing as much as possible and only quoting the specific words that you have to use. Maybe this part right here, banquet speaker, and maybe this part right here, sins of his listeners, and maybe does not evoke an enthusiastic response. I mean, even I could have like paraphrased all of this. I wouldn't have even had to have directly quoted it, but that's what I need to see you doing. So the integration of the evidence isn't strong. Does it subject them to criticism as well as herself? Yeah, it does. So it does follow the strategy. So it does what she says it does. It just doesn't integrate the evidence itself well. Okay, so let's see if she does the next strategy. Right after you give your evidence, you then explain the effect, and then you explain the purpose of that effect. So Luce emphasizes the difficulty of her position. Okay, so that's just her rephrasing what she's already said. That's not an effect. That's just her restating what this means. And in doing so, she warns the audience of the criticism that is coming. Okay, so that again is just what she's saying. I guess you could kind of consider that the purpose. So what is she missing here? She's missing the effect on the audience, how this is supposed to affect them. It's supposed to humble her and make them more willing to listen to her. Uh, but here's the purpose of it. It warns the audience of the criticism that is coming. Let's look at this part right here. Why is this in red? Because you remember, yellow is good, red is bad. It's red because specifically to keep their immediate backlash in check. It's this phrasing right here, in check. That slang terminology is what we want to try to avoid. You are trying to sound like little tiny professional writers, and this makes you sound like you're talking to your friend out on the phone. I was going to say in the cafeteria, but then, we're not in the cafeteria right now, so I went with on the phone. Okay. So this is not a terrible thing right here to keep their immediate backlash in check. That is the purpose. It's just the way that she said it. It's written in a very slang manner. Okay, so let's look at this. Overall, this paragraph has only one piece of evidence. It's a really long piece of evidence. It doesn't have the effect, but it does consider the overall purpose of this evidence. So this is okay. That's what it is. It's okay. Yay, you just introduced a piece of evidence and you just did the basic connection back to the purpose of the piece. That's all. Not a lot of explaining. Let's look at the next paragraph. The next paragraph seems to be a little bit longer, at a glance at least. After stating the difficulty of delivering a controversial speech, Luce cleverly proceeds to place the responsibility on the audience. Okay, so she's got a complex sentence to start. The introductory clause tells you the purpose. I'm sorry, not the purpose. After stating the difficulty of delivering a controversial, that's the strategy that this kid's going to be analyzing right here. Luce cleverly proceeds to place the responsibility on the audience. Again, that's her strategy, to place the responsibility on the audience. Audience is only highlighted because it could be more specific. To place the responsibility on the women at the National Press Club. It could also have been to the journalist in the room, just some kind of specifics. She pointedly reminds the audience, again, it's just that basic naming of an audience. Why is it remind also in there? Because there's no integration of this evidence. It's basically you just like throwing it in. She pointedly reminds the audience. That does not grammatically flow with the sentence. This quote is just thrown in there. I'm not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. But let's look at it again. It does the basics. I am not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. That is definitely evidence of placing the responsibility on the audience. So it matches with the strategy that she's analyzing. It's just not integrated at all. It's just thrown in there. But look, it's much shorter in quotation than this one right here. So it's better. This way, when the audience takes offense in her message, they can only blame themselves, for they are the reason for her presence. Absolutely. Explaining her purpose in using this piece of evidence and placing blame on them. So purpose is conveyed right here. Again, she kind of hits on the effect that they're going to have in the speech itself, but not the effect of this part right here. Instead, she just goes straight for the purpose itself. So she's missing effect in this case. Okay, but she does have a second piece of evidence, which means this paragraph is a little bit more developed than this one is. Luce further sets up the journalist. I love this. Further. I love that vocabulary of you using a strong verb. She further sets up the journalist, naming the audience, for her incoming attacks. Again, this is another great thing. Just highlighting the tone of things. Her incoming attacks tell me that that will be later, because remember, we're just introducing and setting up for the speech, and then this shows the tone of the speech. It's an attack. By reminding them of the basic values of their occupation. Okay, all right. Some good vocabulary words. Reminding them of the basic values of their occupation, definitely a strategy that Luce used. She says, again, you've got your basic introduction to a quote, and then look at that quote, dude. Another problem that we saw right up here. Way too long. Way too long. This is your essay. If your essay it is more of their words than it is yours, that's a problem. Look at this paragraph. Out of all of these sentences, her sentences are only 2 lines long. Her quote is 3 lines long. Same thing right here. 3, 4 lines long. That's too much. Paraphrase as much as you can and directly quote the portions that you have to. So she says that there's no audience anywhere who should be more bored, indeed more revolted by a speaker who tried to fawn on it, butter it up, exaggerate its virtues, play down its faults, and who can more quickly see through it, any attempt to do so. If we're talking about the basic values of their occupation, I wouldn't say that this is the basic value of their occupation. I don't think that that's the best piece of evidence to match it with this strategy that she's analyzing. This strategy is the basic value of their occupation. What is the basic value of their occupation? To deliver the truth. Okay, so then why is that piece of evidence not given here? That's the piece of evidence that would have better matched with that strategy that she's analyzing. But I can see a vague connection to it, so okay, I'll give it to her. I'll be nice. That's really what this is. This grader that graded this was very nice to connect this piece of evidence with this strategy that she's saying it exemplifies. Luce compliments these journalists on their valiant pursuit. I like that word. Valiant pursuit of the cold hard truth, and that is exactly what she intends to deliver. So what is the problem here? If we're really honestly analyzing this, this is basically a summary of this part right here. When she reminds them of the values of their occupation, it is a valiant pursuit of the cold hard truth, and that is exactly what she intends to deliver. This does not match with this evidence. It matches more so with the strategy that she's claiming the evidence is. Again, if she would have given the right evidence, reminding them of their basic value of their occupation to deliver the truth, which is word for word from the speech, that would have complimented these journalists on their valiant pursuit of the cold hard truth. But let's be honest, they do not explain the effect on the audience here. They explain no purpose. They are summarizing what she stated. That's it. There's no effect. There's no purpose that is given. So this paragraph is actually, while it may seem longer, much more underdeveloped than this one. The purpose isn't even given here. All right, let's look at the next paragraph. So what I want you to learn from this paragraph is really what your goal is. Piece of evidence, give it. Then tell me the effect of that piece of evidence. Then tell me how that effect is supposed to further the overall purpose of the piece. If you're not doing that, then you're not focusing on the purpose of the whole essay. Let's look at the last paragraph. Luce finishes her introduction with a compliment to the U.S.Press. Okay, so she's showing where it is in the speech, which is good, and compliment to the U.S.Press, so she names the audience, which indicates the high regard in which she holds the profession of journalism. Okay, so this is basically explaining what she does or yeah, what she says. It's explaining what she says, and it does so. I like this verbiage right here, high regard. The reason why I highlighted this in red is because this is something that a lot of us do. We add in those extra words. I call them verbose because they're not necessary at all. Let's read it without the words in which. Luce finishes her introduction with a compliment to the U.S. Press, which indicates the high regard she holds the profession of journalism. These are those extra words that tell us nothing. They're just extra words. Stop using them. But this is good vocabulary overall, and it's getting to the next strategy. Oh, wait, but if you look here, right here, she never actually gives us that strategy, or she never actually gives us evidence of that strategy. And so that's the real flaw here. We have all of this information. Where does she compliment the U.S. Press? Well, she talks about how they're the greatest press in all of the world, but there's no evidence of that. This way, Luce does not present herself entirely as an enemy to her audience. That is supposed to be the effect. That's great. This is awesome. The problem is that it's the effect, it's the purpose, it hits on everything that I need. I just don't have any evidence of it from the speech. You have to have evidence. You are analyzing a speech, and if you don't have the actual presence of the speech in your analysis, then how do I know that you're referencing the right part? How do I know that what you're talking about is the right part that you're analyzing here? Instead, she ensures that the audience is conscious that they asked for the coming criticism, and though she does not necessarily want to, Luce will comply and deliver them their coveted truth. Again, she's summarizing the end of the speech here. There's no analysis. Is she right? Is that the summary? Absolutely it is. And there's some really good vocabulary. Comply, deliver, coveted. There's some great vocabulary in here. Conscious, a lot of people get conscious and conscience mixed up. Conscience is how I remember your conscience is your conscience. This one is just being aware, that the audience is aware that they asked for the coming criticism. She's right. This is exactly what Luce does. The problem is that there's no evidence of it, and she's not explaining necessarily the effect or the purpose of it. Due to her ingenious delivery, so a lot of y'all use this kind of word choice. You tell me that her delivery, that her speech, or that their essay, or that their writing was amazing. It was the most influential. It was ingenious. Stop making these grand claims that you can't prove. If you're reading something from Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, ingenious, influential, definitely defines that. But when you claim that a piece that, honestly, let's be honest, you've never heard of and you've never read, most of you have never heard of Luce, you can't claim its ingeniousness. So stop making these grand declarations that we cannot prove. Don't make it sound bigger than it really is, okay? Only truly honored pieces like TJ's Declaration of Independence or the Bible or any other influential text, you can give it that grand claim. Due to her ingenious delivery, the audience is prepared to listen openly to Luce's critique and attempt to set aside their initial heated reactions with the notion that she is delivering the truth on their behalf. I love this part. This goes back to the overall purpose of the piece, and it's beautifully written. What do I have a problem with? The fact that the kid basically summarized all of the ending and didn't give me any of its effect or purpose here, and there's no evidence of that at all. So while there's obvious awareness that this kid has some skills in writing, they didn't analyze the piece without any evidence because they gave no evidence, and they didn't hit on the effect. So this one overall was actually a 5. This one is one of those ones that's, you don't want to be a 5. Remember, a 5 means that it's kind of passing, but honestly, based on this new format, I don't know that a 5 in the essay category is definitely going to allow you to pass. I don't know how they're planning on cutting off the curve that they're designing, but I don't think that a 5 on the essay will give you a passing score of a 3 on the overall AP test. So we have to work on getting past this and doing better than this. That's the honest message that I want y'all to hear from this. I'm going to add another video that goes over Essay 5. We've gone over the ones that are the real ones that you need to know. You need to be practicing this skill right here. You need to be practicing not to do all of these skills right here. the basic summary of the piece and then the basic, hey, let me throw a giant quote in and then just connect it to purpose and be done. You don't want to do this. You do want to do this. I'm going to go over 5 though, just for those of you that want to watch the additional video that really explains how to get a 9. So some of you that really want that higher score that are shooting for an 8 or a 9, y'all are going to want to watch this next video.